Trade cannot be sustainable. If protectionism continues, open economies will have to react. So we must strengthen the multilateral trading system, increase predictability, develop transparent and joint solutions against unfair practices. These are shared responsibilities for all of us. Let me be very clear. If rules are not respected, free trade becomes only a slogan, and markets stop working. Open economies can stay open alone. Fairness must be mutual. Our hope is clear. Trade should again become fair, predictable, and inclusive. It should not be a geopolitical tool. In this context, the role of the World Trade Organization is very important. We expect it help to reduce global imbalances. While WTO has significantly contributed to global trade and development over the past decades, the current environment highlights the urgent need for reform. As the business community, we have three key priorities: improving decision-making while preserving consensus, ensuring a fair, level playing field by addressing subsidies and overcapacity, and refining special and differential treatment to better support development without creating distortions. To conclude, the business does not a world divided by tariffs, quotas, and walls. We support fair, free, and rule-based trade, because where the trade is, there is a prosperity, employment, and welfare. We believe that global prosperity depends on fair and predictable rules. That's why we will continue to advocate for free and fair trade. With these thoughts, I conclude my remarks and greet you once again with respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hisatchiklioglu. I'd also like to say, gentlemen, I'd like to keep this a conversation as much as possible, so if anyone, after one of you has spoken, would like to have something to add, please just indicate to me, because let's just keep this as a free-flowing conversation. So I'd like to open, there's plenty of points there from Mr. Hisatchiklioglu's opening remarks to touch on in this session, but Mr. Kamil, I'll start with you. With the situation in the Strait of Hormuz and the volatility there, the reverberations around the world, are we seeing here a permanent breakdown of globalized supply chains, or is this just a painful reset? And who wins and who loses in this, what feels unfortunately like maybe a new normal?
Well, let me start by saying I hope it's not a new normal, but also to pinpoint that we've been facing this type of challenge since COVID in different forms and shape and for different reasons. In the last 5 or 6 years, we've had COVID, we've had Russia, Ukraine war, and then this major shift into the blockage of one of the main arteries in terms of energy, fertilizers for the global economy. So the reaction that we have witnessed is very clear. Now we see a push by many countries for what we call economic strategic autonomy, because the disruption in the supply chain has been so severe in each of those crises that countries are remodeling their whole approach to supply chain. And the new trend, which is not in conflict with the global or the globalization of our economy, is more regionalization in terms of supply chains and more bringing production closer to the final consumer. And that's in itself is a welcome development, because environmentally speaking, it's more responsible, and also leads to better regional economic integration within each of those regions. If I take the example of the region, I am honored to be in charge of one of the organizations in charge of it. We saw the trade volume within that region has increased exponentially since the COVID and reached $4.4 trillion in 2023. Statistics are abound about the increasing reliance of our member states on component in their export industry. Even southern Mediterranean countries, which are considered developing country or emerging economy, are now contributing components to major European export to the rest of the world. The same applies to energy because the potential of the region in terms of renewable is extraordinary, and the same would apply to digitalization, but I don't want to take more time, so maybe I can come back later to the subject during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Comenescu, I'd like to come to you. I mean, I think many of those points made by Mr. Kamel just then remind me of the speech that Mark Carney gave at Davos. I think he talked about being in the midst of a rupture and not a transition, a rupture were his words, and that recently great powers have been using economic integration as weapons. A world of fortresses will be poorer, more fragile, and less sustainable. So, in your view, how do we combat this? And do you agree with Mr. Kamel that it's this friendshoring and policies that encourage relocating of critical supply chains to allied or domestic locations, regionalizing of trade? What's your view on this?
First of all, allow me to say that I really enjoy being back in Antalya in this diplomacy forum, which has asserted itself as one of the top gatherings of this kind, global gatherings of this kind. And let me, because starting from the title of this, of the topic of this panel, which is rather a question than a title. And I'll try to make a couple of remarks of rather more general nature as framework for trying to answer. But before anything else, I would like to congratulate the organizers for bringing to this panel as speakers two distinguished representatives of the business community, President Hisari Çaykuroglu and Director General Denton. I feel the need to underline this because whatever politicians, governments may elaborate, adopt as policies, initiatives, and so on, they cannot be implemented if the business community, the entrepreneurial community is not there. And what I would like to say, very important, is not just to call the business community to implement decisions. It is extremely important for the business community to be involved from the very beginning in shaping decisions, in thinking about what type of decisions, shaping them, and adopting them. And it's only in this way that things would go in the way even the politicians may wish. This is the first point. And I would add, picking up from what President Hisari Çaykuroglu said, trade brings prosperity. With your
the easy way is to say my family name, say Rifat. It's very easy.
So Rifat Bey, I fully subscribe to what you have said, and I would dare say, adding that trade and cooperation brings not only prosperity, but security as well. And I think that when people talk about security, one has to take into account that there is a strong economic dimension of security, especially when we are thinking in long term. This is one point which I wanted to make. Second point is mentions where you have made about distortions, disruption, and so on. And the real question is, whether it is coming from what some would say because of crises like migration, COVID, financial crisis, and so on. I think that there are deeper root causes, and they are coming from the transformation, radical transformation the global society are taking place in the global society. We have to take into account that there are new actors coming on the globe, on the arena. There are, efforts to mitigate, or to cope with this new reality. And we are facing a period where the global order, which we know since Second World War, is not more valid. And then the solution would consist in what? In first of all, and here I fully subscribe to the idea that we have to come back to a society which is managed by rules. And when it comes to the economy, I think, as Rifat was saying, it's extremely important to build upon what has been done in a good way and where the obstacles have been. The experience of the WTO is very important in this respect, and I think that WTO is a key actor, and it has to be preserved while being reformed. And second, I would say, is also to take into account the value of the OECD, because the OECD is the one where you get standards when you come to, for example, investments and so on. So this is one of the points which I wanted to make. Again, when it comes to the economy, there are, as was mentioned here by Nasser, at national level or regional level, we've been witnessing actions aiming at, inward-looking development in limiting dependencies on others. My deep conviction is that we want it to not. In an era of digitalization of the society, interdependencies would continue to grow, would not diminish. And so, rather than seeking kind of, let's say, autonomy, inward-looking, we would rather seek to how to build resilient interdependencies. And this is something which, in my opinion, would be a much better answer. And my final remark is that within this period of time, where we are getting through this type of disruptions, and until hopefully a new global order would be instated, then we have to look into the opportunities which may be brought by regional organizations. And I dare say that despite of the fact that the organization which I had the honor to manage in the last almost 5 years, despite the fact that in the Black Sea region there is a war, there has been a war for more than 4 years, we've been able to make some advancements in this organization. One example is, in the second half of 2023, under the chairmanship in office of Turkey, we've been able, imagine the 3 member states, Russia and Ukraine included, to elaborate a new basic economic agenda for the next decade. When I'm telling that to interlocutors of mine, they are asking how comes? Was it possible? Yes, because I think that there is still the awareness of forward-looking thinking and to think about what are we supposed to build and live with after the war will finish. And this basic economic agenda, as I said, is providing priority areas of action and direction of actions for 10 years from now. So these were the few comments which I wanted to make at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cominescu. I'd like to pick up on the point of regional interdependence, Mr. Khan. It reminds me of the panel that I chaired yesterday was on South Asia and the challenges to regional trade in that region being deep mistrusts, political issues, conflicts. What are the challenges to regional interdependence, and is it your view that this is the way forward to combat what we're seeing in terms of the difficulties of volatility getting in the way of easy trade?
Well, first of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to join this important panel and to be part of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. And the overarching theme for the forum, which is mapping tomorrow and managing uncertainties, I think weaves in very well with this sub-theme that you have picked up for this panel. And the fact that, three of us represent regional organizations and two of us represent private sector, I think says a lot about where the locus and focus of the future conversations should be. But before I come to that, let me make a point and kind of differently articulate something that the earlier speakers have already alluded to. And that is that, we are operating in a larger political system. And in that system, which is unfortunately increasingly being dictated and driven by the law of the jungle, you cannot really expect the trading order and the trading system to be governed by rules. And that's really the bottom line that we need to understand. So if we want to address and change the inequities and inequalities in the trading system, we'll also have to reform the geopolitical system that we have. And we know that, regrettably, the political system is under stress, has unfortunately become ineffective, and largely irrelevant, particularly in the context of some of the more recent developments that we have seen. So for us to be able to lay the foundations of a global system, I think WTO itself, and that really has nothing to do with the fact that when the Uruguay round was finalized, there were only 26 resident missions in WTO and 18,000 pages of negotiated text. Most of those who were actually signing on that text had not even seen and evaluated and examined that text. I think that has changed in terms of the power dynamic in global trade. And that's where I think we need to start looking at reforming, and this is something that President Erdogan said yesterday, and something that to which Foreign Minister Lavrov alluded to, in terms of basically reforming the system. And we speak about rule-based order and rule-based system. But the question is really the consistency, the fairness, and the equality of the application of those rules. And clearly, when the present global compact, which is largely represented by the UN Charter, and whatever came out of the San Francisco conference, Asia was not even represented at that time. And today, in terms of global GDP, in terms of the share in global trade, Asia occupies the majority of it. And yet, there was no representation, there was no voice, and there was no participation. So for us to make the global system relevant, and for us to make it effective, I think it's really very important to go back to the drawing board and start looking at it in a fair and objective manner to make it representative and to make it effective. Now, that's the first part. And the second part, coming back to the question that you raised about regionalism, I really think that this is about time. First, geographic contiguity, particularly in the backdrop of what we are experiencing more recently in our region, has become a big asset, and not just geographic contiguity, but regions with historic overlap, with cultural overlap, with religious overlap. That's the kind of trust-building pointers that you need, because the world is experiencing a huge trust deficit. And for that, we really need to see that regionalism is neither a substitute nor a replacement for multilateralism. It is actually a building block, I would say, for cooperative multilateralism, because all disputes are essentially regional, and also trade. And I can tell you about Economic Cooperation Organization. I don't know how many in this room are aware that we are actually the oldest regional development organization. And we started right here in Turkey in 1964 as RCD, which is Regional Cooperation for Development. And over the years, we can very clearly see a newfound appetite in tapping into the land connectedness, tapping into geographic contiguity to build trade framework that would basically guard against the external pressures, the disruptions, and also facilitate the diversification that most of our economies that are developing economies would need. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Mr. Denton, I'd like to go to you on this rebuilding of the trust deficit. How do we go about that, particularly in a time where, as Mr. Khan points out, it seems that the law of the jungle more and more is dominating?
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be back in Antalya. I last came here, Rifat, when Turkey hosted the G20 in Antalya, and you were the chair of the B20. And I'm proud to say that I am one of the founders of the B20. I'm an Australian, and many people may not be aware of the genesis of the G20, but it actually moved from being a finance ministers' meeting to become a leaders' meeting at the request of a number of people after the global financial crisis. And we liked it in Australia because Australia was in the 20 largest economies. The Europeans preferred to have a G14, and we didn't like that because Australia would not have been in it. And so I went to the then Australian Prime Minister and said, I think it's really important that we actually do everything we can to make the G20 the most important global voice for economic opportunity. And by bringing the business community in, which is what we do in places like APEC, it would create a different tenor, but also the realism that in order to drive economic growth, you've got to have a functioning private sector. So I was very pleased that the G20 also founded the B20 and that we're able to meet in Antalya for that. And I will be back because the International Chamber of Commerce, the organization I'm proud to lead, will be crowding in as the key interlocutor for the COP process. For COP31, we will also be back and working very closely with Rifat Bey and TOBB and the Turkish government. In fact, I'll be spending some time with your champion later on today. And as you know, if I could, this is a beautiful bridge because Australia and Turkey are co-chairing COP31, and so it would be a great opportunity. Now, the matters of the day. I just listened very, very carefully to your comments, Assad, and I deeply appreciate them. But I suppose I look at the world differently. Ultimately, I'm a businessman. I'm actually a capitalist. And to do business and to grow my business, I want to enter into contracts with people. What we at the ICC have done over 100 years, and by the way, we are now in 170 countries, 70% of which is in the Global South, and every year we enable $17.5 trillion worth of economic activity. Irrespective of the political context, we actually enable that amount of activity because we create the infrastructure that allows global commerce to actually operate. We created, for example, the contracts through what was called Incoterms, which anyone in business would know is actually the critical underpinning for commercial arrangements. When it became clear that in order to enable business to function, there was no confidence in variety of economies' jurisdictions, we created and translated arbitration and created private arbitration. And we've created the world's largest and most important private arbitration court because business people wanted to have the certainty of contracts and the certainty of being able to enforce them. We also then created the tools to enable finance to be applicable to trade. So we create all the tools that enable trade finance to operate. We then also worked out that in order to allow goods to go across borders, we actually had to know what their origin was, and we created certificates of origin. And as we move forward, we've also worked out that in order for trade to be more available and for more opportunity to exist, we needed to work to take trade from analog to digital. So we created the Digital Standards Initiative. So we are the ones who are actually digitizing trade on a global basis. I say all that because what you describe is a perfectly understandable perspective on the political context in which we operate. But ultimately, we actually have to provide the infrastructure for it to happen. And we do that in a way irrespective of the political environment, because ultimately we want to trade. We want to be in business. We want to grow our businesses. I'm also a capitalist, as I said. I also sit on the board of one of the largest investment groups in the world. We're a $300 billion fund from Australia. And one thing people, by the way, we together with the Port of Singapore own Mersin Port. But what people don't understand is the largest pool of capital, the fastest growing pool of capital in the world is actually based in Australia. And it's what's called pension capital. And the reason it's important to think about that is we are believers in patient capital. So when we invest in a group like Mersin, we don't invest in Mersin to flip the investment. We invest in Mersin because we believe in the asset, because we believe in the macroeconomic story of Turkey, and we want to hold that asset for 30, 40 years and continue to invest in it. And we want more opportunities around the world to deploy our capital. And to do that, we have to have confidence. You made a very good point, one of the earlier speakers, my friend from Romania, that the OECD is important. You know why? Because it creates norms. It creates standards that we can actually rely on. The investment mandates for most pension funds limit their investment to OECD countries or aligned. So what we're trying to do all the time is to grow the regulatory environment, improve it on a global basis to allow us to invest more. And what I'm really saying here is that I'm interested in the political debate, but ultimately what I'm really interested in is in creating an environment where business can prosper, because what we do know is that the key driver of development is not NGOs, is not actually development assistance. It's actually enabling a strong and vibrant private sector. And where that happens, you will actually have economic activity, and that will be the way forward. Because what we're seeing right now with the collapse of the development assistance model, we're seeing a need to recalibrate for a private sector-led development model, and that's what we're working on at the ICC. So when I look at the world, yes, it's kind of like frustrating, it's disorderly, there's a lot of uncertainty. In fact, we've just done an economic analysis that puts a price on uncertainty. And last year, it cost in unrealized economic activity $360 billion. It's a tax, if I could put it that way. So our job at the ICC, a functioning multilateral platform in 170 countries, which is not frozen or riven by internal debates, because we are focused globally on enabling business, is to create order where we can and actually reduce uncertainty to create as much certainty as we can. And frankly, we have agency, and we deploy that agency to do that. There's more things I'd like to touch on as the conversation emerges, but to be honest with you, and I think Rifat and I would both agree, we can watch as an observer the WTO, but ultimately that's the member states. What we're interested is not so much in the WTO, we're interested in the trading system, how we enable that. And the trading system, my friends, is a lot more than the WTO. It's customs, it's trade finance, it's just getting goods across borders. But what is becoming increasingly clear, that for functioning globalization, for functioning multilateralism, for functioning regionalism, a strong integration with the private sector is critical. I'll just give you two examples because we're here. We just talked about the Black Sea. So after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we had this global crisis in food, debt, energy, Guterres, the Secretary of the UN, created for the first time ever a global crisis response group. And for the first time ever, they realized that to actually move, they needed to bring innovation. So they brought the private sector in, which was me, which was humble ICC. We went in. We're the ones that created and developed the Black Sea Agreement, because no one else thought it was possible, but we thought it was necessary. So we then saw it as a problem to be solved. Right now, and I know Assad understands this very well, there's a particular issue that a lot of people haven't fully understood with the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz. It's the consequences of the absence of access to fertilizer and the immediate consequences of that, with the taking out of that capacity for developing and emerging economies for food scarcity. We don't have a problem down the road. We have a problem now, and it's been clouded, obviously, by oil and gas focus. So we, together with the United Nations Secretary General, are working on what has been called the UNSG task force to create a mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz, and we have done the same thing. We have created a mechanism which will enable a re-establishment of that trade route, recognize the freedom of navigation, and will not be subject to any veto by anyone. But of course, the mechanism now exists. It's roundly supported by member states, but we now wait for the political context to actually enable that to be deployed. And in doing so, again, it's private sector ingenuity that has actually been brought into a public sector forum and created, hopefully, what will be seen as an answer which will improve people's lives, but actually get food to them, which is really important.
Thank you, Mr. Denton. Would anyone like to respond to any points made there, Mr. Comunescu?
Only to say that, there is this French saying, on se félicite, we congratulate ourselves when something is doing. And since John is coming from Paris, I would say that what he said and what Rifat was saying, it's yet another convincing argument about what I dared, saying that involving the private community, the private sector in all these endeavors is quintessential. That's the only thing which I wanted to say.
I agree with almost everything that Mr. Denton mentioned. And really, I think private sector unquestionably has to be at the center of all business activity. And the norms that you are alluding to are actually a product of a compact that we developed over the last 70, 80 years, where we grew up learning about the virtues of free market economy, of free trade, and of how that would bring peace and prosperity to the world. And I must say that it did deliver largely, I would say. Of course, there are failures, but what we had was probably the best possible that we could. Now, that normative framework, and that's absolutely essential, important, but what can happen is that one political action can undo years of hard work that institutions and entities have undertaken in terms of framing the code of conduct for a particular trade or and of course the business sector will have a role to play, and they will have their way to resist those temptations and those inclinations. But what I wanted to say was that we have built this system brick by brick over a long period of time, and it can be dismantled through just one or two actions, and that is what needs to be avoided, and that is what needs to be fixed to be able to ensure that it doesn't repeat in the future.
I think that's a fair point. So I'll quickly respond if I could. Just call it double-handed. The reality is, what we're dealing with now is the re-emergence of power politics. But it's not as though power politics went away during the period of the rules, what's called the rules-based system. It's just that people like Mark Carney didn't actually understand it. I mean, so when he talks about a rupture, it's always been there. It's a re-emergence of power politics. And the reality, if you deal with power, I mean, we negotiate over money, over deals. Leverage is incredibly important. What becomes incredibly clear here in the environment in which we operate is that leverage is the key. And by the way, on trade, the most effective leverage you can have against the imposition, I think, of the US unilateral application of tariffs is actually ensuring that the system that governs the 87% of the rest of the world functions effectively. So it's in all our interests, if you want to have leverage in this game, for us to actually ensure that the system continues to function. And I deeply apologize interrupting you.
No, just to go back to this extremely interesting exchange. Actually, what we're talking about are, yes, power politics has always existed, but we are now in a period where the world is going through a transformation, a deep transformation that we don't know where it's going to take us, and what would be the balance of power 5 years down the road. And within that, we've seen the different disruption the international order have seen, Ukraine, the Gulf, Iran, Israel, and all of that. And what you're describing is what we are all longing for, a rule-based system where the private sector plays its full role, OECD setting standards. I was representing Egypt at a certain point of time in Paris. We made sure that Egypt adhered to the investment committee of the OECD so we can be seen as applying OECD rules and standards. All of that was within the existing order or the existing power balance that we lived through in the last 30, 40 years. What will happen in the next few years, I don't have the answer. There is two scenarios, I would say. One is quite bleak, to be very honest, where protectionism might start creeping on us, where supply chain can be reorganized around strategic alliances, which is very dangerous. Economic security are planned within national border and national policy, protectionism might, and then you have a better scenario, the one that all of us wants to see, which the world or the country will remain globally connected, and then everyone will play his role, including regional integration organization, which are, I agree 100%, the building block. They are not an alternative to the global economy, but they are the building block of the international or the global economy. And here, the prospect of going back to a certain, I wouldn't say, form of rule-based system has a better chance of emerging. But I'm not providing an answer, but I'm not seeing things as rosy. Being a diplomat and not an economist, the shift we're witnessing in the last few years are so important that we cannot in any way or shape predict how this shift, what those shifts will lead to in the next few years, and their impact on economies and on trade at the global scale. Thank you.
Sorry to ask for the floor again, but since there is, I think everybody of us stressed the importance of rules. That brings me to what I would consider to be a kind of a binomial relationship. fairness, and competition. Competition, we have to recognize, has been the engine of progress in history, so long as that competition was a fair competition and not used as an instrument for control or domination. So when I'm thinking about what kind of rules would be at the basis of what would be the new global order, I dream, but I'm keeping realistic, as Nasser was saying, I dream of reaching at an order where, when adopting rules, you adopt them on the basis of the principles of a fair competition. Thank you.
Do you want us to continue this as a dialogue? But I want to throw, if I could, a dead cat on the table, if I could put it that way, because so far we haven't talked about, I think, one of the big challenges that we will all find to the operation of rules or systems, etc., which is artificial intelligence. Now, the reason I wanted to bring that up is that, let's be very clear, the proponents and the masters of, and generally they're masters, not mistresses, of artificial intelligence, do not actually want any binding rules, just if I could share that with you. And yet at the same time, and I haven't participated in the discussions at the Antalya conference on artificial intelligence, but I think generally economists would say, and many proponents would say, this is one of the biggest shifts we're about to see in the operation of the global economy, so the proponents don't want any rules. But what's interesting is a couple of facts to throw out here. Do you know that there's not one data center in Africa? Not one data center in Africa which has been built. There is not, yeah. Well, actually, I'm working on this right now because there is not a roadmap for the development of artificial intelligence actually at the moment underfoot. Data centers support AI. It's interrelated. Yeah. Well, I can tell you that one of the challenges here is that the global south will not be a maker, it will be a taker unless we turn this around. And this becomes important to economic development because one of the most important issues that's emerging is around data sovereignty. And so the reason I'm bringing all this up is that in order to enable artificial intelligence to actually play the role it can play in enabling business and economic opportunity, we need to ensure that there is fairness in the way it operates. That's really important. And if I've got my data point wrong on the data centers, I apologize. But the point I'm actually making here is the absence of the ability of economies to participate in this economic development will actually undermine the opportunities for this economic development to be as effective as it can, because citizens do not want to surrender their digital and data sovereignty to third parties. So we have this tension, I think, between the proponents and ultimately the users and the opportunity and the way in which it can be deployed. And I do think one of the challenges here is the existing system and institutions are not able to grapple with that, because you cannot simply have government players develop the frameworks. You cannot leave it to the private sector alone, because the private sector here is only seen as the tech guys, but actually we in the real economy actually want to have a voice as well. Academics can be helpful, but often they're unaccountable. So we need to get, and also civil society becomes key here as well. I'm looking at you because I think, well, maybe you've got a very powerful response to tell me how to get it done. But I think this is a really challenging issue for us, and it's not being talked about in a transparent way. Language like, we want to democratize access, it's just not true. We actually want to control rather than democratize, and we want to make certain we've actually got a network advantage for as long as possible. But in order for this to be truly, I think, transformational and for the benefit of global society and business in that context, we need to grapple with this issue about how it will be set around in frameworks and rules that are transparent and people understood. And it can't be developed by advanced economies alone. It needs to ensure that developing and emerging economies are integrated in the development of that.
I can't agree more, actually. I'm a great believer that digital transformation in general, and in the heart of it AI, of course, and renewable are the main drivers of protecting globalization in terms of economic and trade, because these two sectors cannot just be confined within the border of a nation state, especially renewables, but also digital transformation, and also their impact, especially digitalization in terms of e-commerce, e-trade, and all of the above. And you know the subject way better than me. So 100%, the technological leapfrogging that the world have seen in the last decade is another driver that might force whatever international geopolitical order would emerge to remain rational, interconnected, and globalized. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, this has been great, and I haven't actually had to do too much work, so thank you, gentlemen. But we're getting to the final 10 minutes, so I'd like to put a question to all of you. Let's go to Mr. Khan first. We've been talking about the need to have systems and standards. I think that's one thing that everybody agrees on in terms of the trade system. But the World Trade, the WTO's last ministerial conference was a bit of a failure, with the US calling it irrelevant and China accusing Washington of unilateralism. So is the WTO still salvageable? Mr. Khan.
Is it me? Okay. As a student of WTO, I find that to be ironical, and very ironical, frankly, because WTO came about on the initiative of the United States, being the biggest proponent of a unified dispute settlement system, which was described as the crowning achievement. And this was actually one of those rare international agreements where the compulsory jurisdiction on dispute settlement was accepted by everybody. And the dispute settlement body, the constitution of panels, and I know that since after Doha round, we have not had any round. And that's why I keep coming back to that fundamental question, that who was on the table when we had those basic agreements? It was initially, China was not there, India was not there the way it is. The European Union also did not negotiate as a partner as it developed over the years. So these FIPs became very important players. Now that reality has changed, and somehow it still is being resisted in terms of getting it reflected into the agreements and into the actual operationalization of the agreements. And that is what explains, in my personal view, the stalemate at the WTO for these past so many years, because we have not had another round. Whereas, you know, Professor Jackson used to say that multilateral trade negotiation is the bicycle theory of trade negotiations, where they have to keep moving. If they don't, then the bicycle will drop down. So I think, I personally think that we have to basically look at the main players, and to create an order where the interests of every key player is fully represented in the framework. And when we achieve that, and the day we achieve that, I'm sure we will have workable agreements.
I fully agree with this, and I would add, coming back to the relationship between the public and the private sector, I think that also the experience of ICSID in Washington is something where we need to take into account and draw upon that experience, because there is the place where disputes between governments and companies are quite often at least looked for to be solved.
Well, first of all, I think, Assad, you made a very good point when you look at the number of countries involved at the point in time at which the Uruguay round was closed, It was a much smaller number, which was easier to understand. But I want to look at the WTO in a very practical way. The WTO came into existence just as the internet went into the public domain. And it actually came into existence before the internet was joined up with payment systems. So the whole development of e-commerce, the digital economy, happened after the WTO came into existence. And you know what? The WTO, founded as it was, did not create a rule book for fair dealing in terms of the digital economy. It just didn't. And because of the challenges of the politics of the WTO, in its years of existence now, and its many years, it has never been able to grapple with the digital economy. So it doesn't have a rule book for it. So on one level, one way I would look at it, it's irrelevant. So you've actually had to have workarounds. The reason we've actually at the ICC created the Digital Standards Initiative, because governments couldn't do it. So we have agency to do that. And what happened in Yaoundé at the most recent meeting, MC14, was a number of economies realized they would never get agreement of all the members now, was 167 members of the WTO? And so they've actually created what's called a plurilateral agreement outside the WTO, though the actual ratification has to be within the WTO, binding those 67 once they've ratified it on the operation of an e-commerce arrangement. But even at the Yaoundé, they were unable to maintain the moratorium that stopped tariffs being put on e-commerce transactions. Can you think about anything crazier than that? That the WTO, which was designed to stop protectionism, has actually enabled tariffs to be put on e-commerce transactions. Now, I don't know, go figure. So my reality is we, as the business community, need to keep working at what we do, create standards which people can buy into on a collaborative and voluntary basis to enable us to move forward, whilst hopefully the WTO tries to catch up.
Yes, for business, for near future, what we are waiting. The IMF's World Economic Outlook report was released at the beginning of the week. The message is very clear. Growth is slowing down. Inflation is staying high. And most critical point was the warning that inflation may last longer than expected. So it is very important for us. So what does the picture mean? This report tells us that central banks are not yet finished. Interest rates will not easily fall, and financial conditions will remain tight. On the other hand, there is something even more important. The world economy is not just slowing down, it was changing shape. Globalization is being replaced by a more fragmented structure. Concepts like friendshoring are becoming the real strategy of companies. That means more work with trusted partners. In short, the world economy is not only slowing down, but also changing shape. The period we're in is different from classic crisis, but it is not a comfortable one. A more fragmented, more unpredictable, and more frequent shock-producing structure is emerging. As the IMF says, in recent years, perhaps this is exactly the new normal: lower growth, higher inflation, and more uncertainty. So I would say economies are not recovering. They are merely trying to stabilize. And this stabilization does not look very comfortable. So what's the solution? There is nothing new on solution side. The IMF makes 3 advices: tight monetary policy for central banks, targeted support for governments, and call for a greater cooperation from everyone. In this new environment, we need more strong partnerships with each other.
Okay, well, that wraps up our hour, I think. Mr. Hisachigliolu, Mr. Denton, Mr. Khan, Mr. Komanescu, and Mr. Kamil, thank you so much for making the time. And it's great how quickly an hour goes by when the conversation is organic and free-flowing. So I'm sure everybody will agree with me. That was fantastic. And let's all thank the panelists. Thank you.
having us, and we're grateful to our brethren in Turkey for organizing this extremely important event, which is taking place at an extremely critical time for the whole region. I think we are where we are, and I think the challenge for us now is to see how we can all come together and ensure that we overcome these terrible challenges with which our region is faced, and move beyond the moment into ensuring longer-term peace and security and stability in the region. Obviously, we're all happy that there's a ceasefire now. We want the ceasefire to be lasting, and we want the negotiations that are ongoing now to contribute in a meaningful way to ensuring that what happened doesn't happen again. And that means any solution to the conflict must, and I'm talking about conflict between America and Iran right now, must ensure that we address all the causes of tension over the previous years. On the agenda, obviously, is the issue that seems to be the focus of the talks with the United States now, which is the nuclear issue. That has to be dealt with in accordance with international law and in a way that ensures the security of all. But also, other issues must be on the table that pertain to us in the region. Interventionism in the region, meddling in the internal affairs of countries, investing in proxies outside state norms, and violation of sovereignty. So these are all issues that must be put on the table, must be addressed properly in order for us to be able to have a new era of peace and stability. And again, I think I can speak for our brothers in the Gulf and for us in Jordan. We found ourselves at the receiving end of Iranian attacks unprovoked. And that, raises a question as why would Iran target countries in the neighborhood that had nothing to do with the war, that have actually worked to prevent the war from happening. So these are serious questions with which we're going to have to grapple in the region. How do we ensure regional relations that are based on mutual respect, respect for neighborly relations, compliance with international law, respect for the sovereignty of nations, and non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries. The other issue is Lebanon, which has been suffering tremendously from continued Israeli aggressions. That's something that we have condemned and that we stood against. Lebanon deserves to live in peace and security. The current government is doing everything it can to ensure that it exercises full sovereignty over all its territories, to make sure that that the state is the only party that has access to weapons, that controls the decision of war and peace. And we stand firmly behind the Lebanese government in its effort. We stand firmly behind Lebanese security, stability, territorial integrity, and sovereignty. We urge an Israeli withdrawal from every inch of occupied Lebanese land, and at the same time, we stand behind the Lebanese government as it does what any government should do, which is ensuring that decisions of war and peace are the exclusive domain of the government. Again, we have to look at sources of threats to the stability in the region. So overcoming the current conflict with Iran and ensuring relations based, as I said, on mutual respect, because none of us in the region want conflict with Iran. We all have wanted to have good relations with Iran, but in order for that to happen, causes for tension must be addressed, and I think I outlined that. Another source of threat, obviously, is the failure to solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict on grounds that guarantee justice and the Palestinian people right for freedom and statehood per international law, and which is the only path to a just and lasting peace in the region. In the midst of the war with Iran, Gaza has been forgotten. Israeli unilateral illegal measures that are undermining all prospects for peace in the West Bank are continuing, including through expansion and building of settlements, annexation of land, economic suffocation of the Palestinian leadership and people, violation of the historic and legal status quo in Jerusalem and its both Muslim and Christian holy sites, and that's something to which we have a special responsibility in Jordan, with His Majesty being the historic custodian of those holy sites. All that need to be put on the table if we are to have a Middle East that is at peace, that is secure, that is safe. So Israeli interventionism, expansionism, refusal to recognize the right of the Palestinian people to freedom and statehood. It's a violation of Lebanese sovereignty, Syrian sovereignty, where the whole world is standing behind the stability of Syria as the government moves ahead in a very convincing manner to rebuild the country and has declared it wanted no conflict with anybody, and yet we see Israeli attacks. So we cannot have the region hostage to uncertainties. We cannot have the region continue to be hostage to continued violation of international law, and we cannot have the region continuing to be hostage to the agenda of Netanyahu and his government in the region. So a lot of work to be done going forward, and I think the key to success in addressing all those challenges is for us in the region to come together, organize our priorities, work together, maximize our collective work to be able to defend our interests, defend our security, and also build the future of peace, security, and prosperity that we want for all our people in this part of the world.
Minister, you've summarized everything so well, and I was the one that I'm pushing you right now to look specifically at the security aspects of regional cooperation and moving beyond zero-sum. We will, of course, talk about economic and cultural and all the other exchanges that are required to move beyond zero-sum politics. But to you, too, Secretaries General, how much input have your organizations had in trying to move beyond the zero-sum politics that we're witnessing right now on this day? As the Foreign Minister said, we're talking also, of course, about Lebanon and Gaza and the occupied territories, as well as the war on Iran. Okay, your microphone is open, so go for it.
Let me, if I may, approach almost the identical subject the Foreign Minister of Jordan touched upon, but from a different angle. And let me also comment on your opening introduction or statement, the paragraph you read. I would claim, sadly, that this Arab region, the so-called Middle East, so actually it is the Arab region. The Arab region has been subject to pressures from the outside world, then the Palestinian issue or problem, almost for 40, 50 years with the inception or the birth of the State of Israel in 1948. Then in 79, 80, add to that pressure and the conflict between Arab countries and the Arab League on one side and Israel on the other. Add to that the Iranian Revolution and the behavior of that revolution. So for almost 80 years now, almost 80 years, 75 years, pressures on Arab countries from the West, Israel, trying to aggrandize, to add lands, to take over Arab territory. And during the last episode, they were almost trying to expel Palestinian population out of their territories, whether in the West Bank or Gaza. These are facts that has to be recognized and known. But let's turn to the East. 79, 80 emerges a revolution in Iran, and the behavior is aggressive, hostile, conniving, to the point that, again, the Arab region in its totality mainly Gulf, were subject to a behavior, the least to say is improper. The least to say, because it ended up by an attack on Gulf countries as well as Jordan for no reason whatsoever. For no reason whatsoever. So, and there I have really and truly to salute the populations of Jordan and Gulf. Why is it so? Because in the midst of war, they sustained themselves. They showed resilience, solidarity, cohesion, and they came where everybody is respecting them. So there, Gulf has to be recognized as well as Jordan. So these two pressures have to come to an end first in order to create a new dynamics with a new situation that would lead to a different quality of life. I, for one, I have had my father, to bring it to your attention, to bring to you the idea. My father was an Air Force pilot in 1948. From the 15th of May, 48, till he retired in 62, he was every day on recall, in emergency. As he left, and those who joined, they continued in his situation up till the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. So what I mean by that is that you are living in a region where everybody is always preparing for confrontation and war. So do not convince me that things will improve without the change of behavior of these two. Israel first, Iran followed. Without their behavior changing, it will continue the same, the equation. And sadly, with that tension, nothing on the ground changes actually, meaning the Israelis have been trying for 80 years to aggrandize, to enlarge. Israel is still the same Israel we knew it according to the international law in 1948 or 49. Yes, they occupied, but they cannot claim legally ownership of the territories. They have been fighting in Lebanon since 78, since July 78, and even prior to that. It is still the Litani River, the I don't know what river. It is a limited area that doesn't exceed 150 square miles. So why the heck would you keep trying to do what you're doing while it won't change, because there is resistance and the resistance will continue. In relation to Iran, it is almost the same. Gulf is prospering. Sadly, there has been an evil attempt to destroy that project, but it won't. It won't be destroyed. So a change of behavior is required on these two players. There is no change. Maybe my grandchildren will be witnessing the same discussion as we are witnessing it right now.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Gate. Secretary General al-Badawi, as you know, Oman said just 2 days before the war began, which was February the 28th, that they were this close to an agreement, that Iran had given guarantees that went even beyond the original JCPOA. And then the Americans and the Israelis began this war. But isn't actually this conflict the perfect opportunity for Gulf nations to come even more together than they have been and collectively to try to find a solution? Is this kind of concretized in the minds of all those Gulf countries and the Arab League, these multilateral institutions, that this is the moment to move forward beyond zero-sum politics?
Thank you. Thank you for having me in this panel, and I want to thank the organizer of Antalya Forum for the hospitality and the great preparedness. The Gulf countries' attempt for stabilizing the region has been around ever since the establishment of the Gulf Cooperation Council in 1981. There are real actual examples of our true intentions toward reaching a normal relationship with Iran for many, many times. Late King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia attempt in 2006 or 7. Late Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed, the Emir of Kuwait, attempt in 2014, 2015. Saudi Arabia normalizing its relationship with Iran in 2023. The Gulf Cooperation Council meeting together, joint meeting between the foreign ministers of the Gulf, of the GCC with the Irani foreign minister in November 2024 in Doha, Qatar. So our attempt to normalize and have a decent relationship with Iran is not something new, or it's something that we need now to think about it. We've been thinking about it. It's the other partner that has the problem. It's the other partner that has the secret cells. It's the other partner that had 2 hours right after they got hit on 28th of February. They knew exactly where to hit, which means that they have been planning this for a long time. Some GCC countries were drafting their statement of condemnation for the attacks on Iran while they received the attacks.
Wow.
They were drafting it. They were reading it and
Wow.
redrafting it. So this is the kind of regime we have to deal with. I don't think I can add more to Mr. Ayman or Mr. Ahmed's statement, but the future of the region needs a true partner in Iran, a partner that believes in peace and stability, a partner that believes that whatever will happen will affect the whole world. What we have built in our countries, in the 6 countries, we built it because we want to maintain it and sustain it. This is the kind of attitude that we have. In 1961, Kuwait got its independence. On the same year, Kuwait established the Kuwait Fund for Arab Development. This is the mentality of the GCC, helping, assisting, sharing the goodness with everybody. This is what we need. Now, what we hope for now is the success of the dialogue, because everything else will be a disaster, not only for the Gulf, but the whole entire world. If this fails, only God knows what will happen. Seriously. All that we call upon all the international community to come up with a solution to this. Everybody needs to use the leverage to reach out a peaceful solution. Otherwise, God knows what will happen.
May I remind you, you don't need me to ask you a question if you want to say something. Just press your button and talk. I was going to ask you, gentlemen, but I think, Foreign Minister Safadi, you've answered it. If there is to be a move beyond zero-sum politics, that surely must include Israel. But as Secretary General Gates said, he thinks that his grandchildren may be seeing the same situation that we are witnessing today. So maybe my question has almost already been answered.
No, I mean, none of us want zero-sum politics. All of us want peace. All of us want stability. All of us want security. And again, I mean, we have been at the receiving end of attacks in the region, in the Gulf, in Jordan, you know, in the whole Middle East. And what we've always worked for is peace, security, and stability, because we recognize that's the only path to doing our job, which is serving our people and building the right future for them. And we do understand the interconnectivity of our collective security. So that said, I think the first step is to really identify the causes of tension. Why are we are where we are today, and then deal with them. In the case of Iran, as I said, not all of us have worked to ensure that we have good neighborly relations, because Iran is part of the region and we always wanted to have good relations with Iran, but it's not because of what the Gulf did or what we did in Jordan or what Egypt did or anybody did that we didn't have those good relations. It's because of unfortunate Iranian interventionist policies that violated sovereignty, that meddled in internal affairs, that invested in proxies, undermined states' sovereignty. That needs to be put on the table, and that needs to be fixed in order for us to be able to move forward. And as Chairman of GCC, dear friend, said, we woke up before we were even able to articulate a position on the war, which we all worked against, as I said, and tried to prevent. We found ourselves being attacked by Iran, and that changed the whole dynamic. And when it comes to that, I mean, in Jordan, I think our position has been unequivocal from the word go. We stand by our Gulf brothers in defending their sovereignty and security. Whatever threatens their security, we see it as a direct threat to Jordan, and we support whatever steps they take to defend their security, sovereignty, stability, and the safety of their people. And we and the Gulf and the rest of the Arab world and Egypt, of course, and even with the larger region with Turkey, we all have been working towards ensuring peace and stability. So that's one aspect of the conflict that needs to be addressed. And again, this war has exposed a lot of fragilities in the collective mechanisms that we have at our hands. So we need to do a lot of soul searching into how we can all come together as a region and develop institutions that will enable us to defend ourselves, but also invest in building the future of peace and security that we want. The other side, we have the issue of Israeli occupation of Palestinian land, the continued Israeli measures that are making the two-state impossible to realize and therefore undermining all prospects for peace. We have to address that, because unless we're able to find this just and lasting peace on the basis of the two-state solution, basis that would fulfill the Palestinian people's right to freedom and statehood on their national soil on June 4, 1967 lines, we will not be able to move towards that stable future. But I think now we're facing a new era of Israeli expansionism that's being expressed in public by Israeli ministers who do not hide or are very aggressive in their statements that they want to take more land, that they want to occupy Lebanese land, that they want to occupy Syrian land, that they're not going to allow for the Palestinian people to have their right to freedom and the Palestinian occupied territory fulfilled. And that is a challenge to regional security. And whatever happens in the region has repercussions across the globe. Europe will definitely be affected by instability in the Middle East in many forms, and we've seen that in the past: migration, terrorism. And you know, we in the Arab world, we're not playing zero-sum games. We're saying we want to have a formula that will fulfill the legitimate rights of all. So the Arab Peace Initiative goes back to 2002. And what is the Arab Peace Initiative? It's a comprehensive solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict on the basis that would guarantee Palestinian right to statehood and freedom, will ensure the liberation of occupied Palestinian and Syrian land, and will ensure the security for Israel and ensure for Israel a future in which it is part of this region, accepted and normalized with. That has been the formula that we've been pushing for decades now. Unfortunately, we did not have a partner across the river that will engage in those talks, which will be, if we are to realize that objective, that will be in the interest of everybody in the region, including Israel. Because yes, Netanyahu is making military gains, but I think strategically, Israel is suffering a strategic defeat, if you want to look at the bigger picture. So I think this is the time, and again, the threat to our collective security in the region must produce a new approach that, again, builds on our collective abilities, on our collective commitment to peace and stability, so that we create conditions that will ensure what happened in the past does not happen. And of course, in that endeavor, we're going to need brothers like Turkey that plays a major role in regional politics, that has a key place to fill in any negotiating of the future of the region. Other countries like Pakistan and others that are playing a major role. So all of us in the region need to come together, and I mean the broader region. But I think we also need to partner with our allies and friends outside the region, in Europe, in the US, Japan, Asia, everywhere, to try and see how we can come together and ensure stability. And I think one point maybe we did not address sufficiently is that we've seen the impact of this war on global trade, on supply chains, on prices of energy, commodity. That is serious. Yes, countries in the region at the exporting side of it have suffered. Countries in the region at the importing side have suffered. But the whole global economy has been disrupted. And you're not going to be able to mitigate against this happening in the future unless you address the root causes of conflict, whether with Iran in terms of its interventionism and meddling in internal affairs, and of course, key is the Israeli aggressive illegal policies that are undermining the stabilities of many countries in the region, Lebanon, and I said Syria. Syria is a case in point, if I may divert a little bit. Syria just came out from almost 14 years of destruction and oppression and bloodshed. You have a new government that says, I want to build my country. I don't want conflict with anybody. And as far as Israel is concerned, I'm willing to respect the 1974 armistice. And yet, how is Israel reciprocating? By occupying more Syrian territory, saying publicly it's destabilizing Syria, meddling in its affairs. How could that policy be justified? And does that not show clearly what is the source of tension in the region? So again, I think basically key to whatever we do going forward is ensuring that we address the root causes of conflict in a collective manner that will ensure the better future that we all want. And I think, again, our solidarity in the region against those common threats has been manifested very, very clearly. And I think now is the time to make sure that the soul-searching process that must take place in the region and beyond hopefully will produce new mechanisms that will be more effective in addressing all those challenges and creating a path towards solving them on sustainable ways. And of course, one thing that I must say is that also when it comes to freedom of navigation, I think that has been a victim of the current reality. And I think no country should be allowed to control such a vital pathway. And whatever happens after the war or during the negotiations to produce a solution, I think it must ensure the freedom of navigation per international law and per the law of the seas as well. That is vital for stability as well.
Yeah. Secretary General, were you pressing your button for a reason? Okay.
I didn't press
okay.
it.
If you want something, if you want to say something, say so. Otherwise, I've got something for you.
You see, again, one has to reflect on the sources of Iranian and the sources of Israeli behavior. If one manages to understand where they come from, maybe you can convince them to change. But let's take these two models and how they behaved in relation to the military nuclear capability. Just one item, military nuclear capability. The Israelis, very early in the Arab-Israeli confrontation, decided to go nuclear. And they managed to have a nuclear military capability that was threatening the Egyptians in '73. And with the NPT and the international community and everybody calling for a Middle East free of weapons of mass destruction, biological, chemical, and nuclear, everybody was closed mouth when it comes to the Israeli nuclear capability. Who is benefiting but one country? Israel. Then the Iranians see what had happened with the Israelis. So they start enriching uranium. The enrichment of uranium, usually it is 3%, 5% for medical and scientific reasons. But why would you go to 60% or 70%, aiming up to 90% unless you are aiming for a nuclear capability yourself? Imagine the Iranians would have managed. That will not be the so-called Islamic bomb. That will be an Iranian capability versus an Israeli capability. What do you think the rest of the region would have been doing as a reaction? What do you think of this country, a great former empire, Turkey? What would you think the major Arab countries would have been doing as a reaction for the two umbrellas that are threatening them? So what I mean is the reasoning and the sources of the behavior of the foe or the opponent has to change first. The Arab countries have been declaring all along, let's establish an area free of weapons of mass destruction. Let's agree, all of us as a region, including even the non-Arab countries, to denuclearize. The Israelis are not only hiding it, the Israelis are being protected by the main players of nuclear capability. If you raise the issue, you are confronted by a denial. So there has to be a change of heart and course, or else if things will remain like this, the Israelis will keep the occupied territories, thinking that they can stay for as long as life would permit. But for everything, there is an end. Occupation has to end. And the Arabs, as my friend Ayman stated, The Arabs presented Israel in 2002 the Arab peace proposition. Land for peace, state for peace. We will normalize fully with you in return of you accepting the right of the Palestinians for self-determination. The Israelis laid down at the time, as I recall, 17 conditions and questions for a very simple equation. Recognize the right of the Palestinians, we recognize you and normalize with you fully. So, again, I insist there has to be a change. And sadly, I do not detect the change in both quarters. In Israel, as Ayman said again, there is a rightist behavior unprecedented in the history of Israel, leading Israel to nowhere. To nowhere. Not only to nowhere, actually they are leading Israel, I have to admit, towards a new cycle of confrontations and military confrontations that we do not want to. What we want is to modernize, to open up to the world, to live as people, and to have proper food at our tables. And the Iranians are not helping on the other side. That is the sad facts as I see them right now.
We probably have about 15 minutes left, so let's move it beyond the military and the confrontational. Because exactly as the Secretary General is saying, everyday people just want to make sure their families are okay, that there's enough food on the table, that they have a job. And yet, Secretary General al-Budawi, the Abraham Accords have come from outside the region. But if you see the result, I think my figures are probably 12 months out, but they still illustrate the difference in trade that has happened between the UAE and Israel since they signed the Abraham Accords. It's now more than $1 billion, which really is nothing, but compared to what it was before, is something. And right now, from the White House, there's news that possibly Syria will be joining, that Lebanon will be joining. Can't see that happening now because of Israel's actions. But do you see the Abraham Accords as a good example of how to move towards win-win? Because that's what the Arab Peace Initiative is as well. It's win-win. You give something, you get something back. Don't forget to press the button.
Well, I think the Abraham Accord is a sovereign matter. Each country has its right to engage itself with whatever arrangement, whatever treaty it would like to enter. So it is based on country base. But I want to go back to the point Mr. Abul Ghaid said. We gave them the Abraham Accord in 2002.
Yeah.
The whole Arab world gave them the Abraham Accord. The whole Islamic world also joined into this treaty. If the Israeli don't be held accountable to their acts for all these decades, and especially their acts after October 23, there will be no peace, and it will be just ink on paper. Israel needs to be held accountable. The international community also needs to be responsible for other issues. For example, we feel very sorry and saddened that the international community failed 2 weeks ago to pass a resolution, a basic resolution, that ensures the movement in the Hormuz Strait. There is no language of usage of the force, there is no Chapter 7, there is just calling upon the international community to respect the shipment movement, the maritime security. It failed. So it's not about what kind of agreement you sign. It's about implementing what you sign. It's about the true intention. What are the true intentions of Israel? The international community last September, under the leadership of Saudi Arabia and France, did the conference on recognizing Palestine. Many countries joined. Many countries we thought they would never join, they joined because of them being fed up of Israelis' behavior. This hold them responsible, a measure for a measure. You cannot just take and not give anything. We did that in 2002. It is as simple as that.
Pardon? I didn't even press the button. Over to you.
Yes, please. I don't think that the problem is within the Abrahamic Accords. I would claim, as they were happening in 2019, 2020, even prior to that, 2017, when people were talking about the possibility of normalizations between Israel and a number of Arab Gulf countries, was there the normalization. The issue, in my opinion, and as I kept criticizing what I was listening to, and I'm sure that most of the audience will understand what I'm talking about, is the Israelis, as well as those proponents helping Israel to achieve a breakthrough here and there, kept coming all the time to people like me and said, and to Europeans and to foreigners, forget about the Palestinian issue. Forget about the Palestinians. They will remain as is under occupation, but we will normalize with the Arab world, and we will confront Iran, and lastly, the Palestinian question will be forgotten. So the purpose and the objective was forget about Palestine. No Arab or Muslim or a just person can accept the injustice that has been inflicted on the Palestinians. No one ever. So this is the crux. But if the Israelis, as well as the Americans at the time, were offering the Palestinians a political horizon, shyly, I say, political horizon. It is a political settlement for their aspirations, for their self-determination. Then I would have understood that you want to normalization to precede the Palestinian issue. Well, I accept, but a settlement for Palestine is coming. But to tell me, forget about Palestine, forget about the Palestinian people, we will compel them to emigrate, and we will expel them out of historical Palestine for the sake of newcomers, I do not understand it. So this is the crux of that notion of be careful. There has to be two issues there, Palestine and normalization, which is the crux of the whole thing since 2002.
Let's possibly finish by talking about the commonalities that Middle Eastern countries have, that they can work together to move away from the topic of this particular theme of zero-sum games. In Japan, They have just invented a new word. It's because of how the climate crisis is affecting Japan. The word is to describe a day that the measurement of temperature goes beyond 40 degrees Celsius. The word didn't exist before. It's called kokushobi. It means cruelly hot or brutally hot. You two gentlemen on this side are the heads of multilateral organizations. The Foreign Minister of Jordan, the question applies to you as well. The things that you have to face together, the climate crisis, food security, water security, these are the things that can bring win-win situations, aren't they? Foreign Minister, if you want to start.
Thank you. I mean, we are working together on all those issues. I mean, if you look at the joint investment in regional projects that all of our countries are in, if you look at the commitment that we all have to build further mechanisms of regional cooperation that would address multiplicity of challenges that you just pointed to.
Would you like it to go faster, or are you happy with the pace?
We are, all of us want it to go faster. All of us are doing it together. I mean, Jordan-Gulf relations are excellent. A lot of Gulf investment in Jordan is helping propelling our vital projects. Jordan, Egypt cooperate, Egypt, Gulf cooperating, Turkey, other regional countries. We all realize that there is a lot of common ground that we can build on to address common challenges, which, as I said, the fundamental role of all of us is to serve our people, to make sure that our people have better lives and have a path to a better future. That is all. I think we're all working on that. We all realize the importance of that. That said, you need stability. Yeah. Because 1 month of instability can undo years of work. We're looking now, we're talking about railway connectivity, we're talking about energy connectivity, cyber connectivity, water cooperation. All these are on the table, but again, you look at the current crisis, what has it done to to the whole global economy, not just to the regional economy? So we need stability. That doesn't mean we stop working on other projects. We do, but our ability to maximize the outcome of our efforts is contingent on the success of our efforts to bring about peace and stability to the region. And again, I mean, we just need to identify those sources of threat and deal with them. So you've got relations with Iran that needs to be addressed in a way that will ensure a better future for the Arab countries and for Iranians as well. I mean, they are part of the region. But I said, to get there, we need to address Iranian policies that have created this tension over decades. When it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict, again, I reiterate, all of us in the Arab world are committed to a just and lasting peace on foundations that will guarantee it will last. And that means fulfilling the rights of the Palestinian people to freedom and statehood so they can live in peace and security with Israel in the region. And in doing that, obviously, we need to work with our partners in the broader region, but also with the international community. The United States, President Trump played a major role in getting the Gaza ceasefire. We appreciate that. He just played a major role, again, the leading role, along with other powers in the region and beyond, to produce a ceasefire in Lebanon. That's something we appreciate. But we still have a long list of issues to which we have to address ourselves. And I think, again, if you want to talk about multilateralism, I think international law must be respected. It must not be a selective application of international law based on the power politics or based on the ability of one country to have immunity against the rest of us in the international community. So we need multilateralism, we need regional cooperation and integration, we need to abide by international law, and we need to make sure that international law applies equally to all, because the selective application of international law has undermined its credibility. And people, I mean, you have a whole younger generation now that is grasping information immediately with social media and all. And in their minds, what is international law if it does not apply equally to all? What is international law if it is violated day in and out, and international organizations entrusted with protecting that law are not able to even call the crimes that are being committed against people. So that is the reality with which we have to grapple. But again, I think from our end in the region, we will continue to work for peace. We'll continue to work for stability. Our countries are affected by everything that's happening. The world is affected by what's affecting our countries, and we've always extended hands of peace and cooperation to all. We're going to continue to do that. And but again, I will end with what I probably said before. In order to have the future of peace and stability that we all deserve, we have to address the root causes of conflict and solve them. Other than that, we'll find ourselves facing the same set of threats year in, year out.
It's interesting that while I'm trying to move it beyond conflict, we're always coming back to conflict, and it's completely understandable, of course. We're supposed to be finished, but Secretaries General, I'm not going to finish this session until I've had a final word from you. Okay, Secretary General Abul Gate.
You cannot escape facts of life because they are pressing you to take positions and to defend positions. There is something called, for instance, the pride of the Palestinian. He's being subjected to a continuous daily abuse by Israel. So that is a situation that cannot last for life. The Iranians have been for 45 years working on a certain project to harm Gulf. Not to defend themselves, but to harm Gulf, to the point that I claim the attacks against Gulf cities was aiming at inflicting the deepest damage on infrastructure. Why would you destroy infrastructure of a rising? I'll give you a very simple model. Take a country like Egypt, 110 million people. I'm Egyptian, so I know my country. I do not represent my country, but I know exactly. The Egyptians, with that war in Gulf, decided to squeeze their energy production to save. Prices are increasing to a point that is again putting the Egyptian government under difficulty. But imagine if the Suez Canal is closed due to whatever military action, or obstructed by the Houthis as they did in June 25. It damaged the Egyptian economy. The losses of Egyptian economy at the time were between $8 to $10 billion for the Suez Canal solely. Take today the issue of the 3.5 million Egyptian nationals working in Gulf and their remittances to the Egyptian economy that amounts to possibly $40 billion a year. So instability and war obstructs lots of the projects you are talking about. Stability is needed, as Ayman said, and without stability, nothing would improve.
Okay, we are out of time, but absolutely, Secretary General
I'll stick with your
Abu Dhabi,
question.
you are going to have the closing statement, and then that's going to be it.
Well, I think the role of regional organization is extremely important. I think the success of the regional organization is or can be gauged from different aspects, one of which one of which is its ability to connect with other countries and other blocs. We in the GCC have 28 strategic partnership with 28 countries and 8 regional organizations. These tools we use in order to connect the world, in order to make sure that there is peace and stability and prosperity. These are the right measures you need to take within a regional organization. We have achieved prosperity that we are extremely proud of. We have achieved resilience. I didn't talk about it because Mr. Abu Ghait talked about it, so I didn't want to repeat it during this crisis. But let me give you an example, and I'll close with that. The 3 smallest countries by size and population in the GCC are Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait. Their population in total is 9 million. The population of Iran is over 90 million. The GDP of these 3 countries is more than the 90+ million in Iran. This is what nationally and through the GCC we have achieved through our regional organization. So the success of the regional organization is a must for its members, and it's for neighboring.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you actually projected it outside the Arab world as well, because I really wanted to ask you about that, but time is always not enough in these sessions. Gentlemen, thank you so much indeed. That is your panel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.